So let's talk about the job interview question. What are your strengths and weaknesses? This is a standard job interview question. This is actually 2 job interview questions in one. So it's 2 separate questions. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? So they can ask those independently, or they can ask you this mammoth of a question where you have to sort of answer both questions back to back. Now, sometimes, okay, I just want to say this. Sometimes when you're in the moment and if you're feeling especially nervous and you get an interviewer asking you this question, sometimes, especially if we're new at this, our minds can go blank because of the nerves, and we can forget what we're talking about. We can forget what was asked of us. Or in a case like this, if they ask you sort of 2 questions back to back, you don't want to forget to answer the second one, right? You answer the first one, and by the time you get to the end of your answer, you forgot that they asked you a second one. So what can be very useful, if you've never done this before, is to bring to a job interview some kind of pad of paper and a pen or a pencil, and then you can just jot down things very quickly. And this is kind of something I've been doing for many, many years. When you're in these situations, it sometimes helps to have a pad of paper in front of you and a pen or a pencil. And then if they ask you something like this, multiple questions all at once, you can sort of jot down strengths, weaknesses, right? And then when you're talking, you don't get sidetracked. You remember what you're supposed to be answering, and you remember the next question they asked you, so you can give them the answer to the second one too. That can sometimes help. So if you've never done that before, considering doing that, it's a good thing to have a blank piece of paper at a job interview. Yes, paper is fine, even in this day and age. It's not just because I'm old. Paper is fine. It's actually very convenient. And there's some issues with putting devices on the table. If you have a smartphone or a tablet or anything, there can be issues. People don't know if you're recording them. People don't know if you're distracted. You're waiting for, a call or a text message. People can make all kinds of assumptions. So paper avoids all those issues, and it's just super convenient. So that's what I'd say. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. You go to a job interview and somebody asks you, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What should you say? Well, let's answer these questions in turn. First of all, they're asking you, what are your strengths? Okay, so let's start with that. Now, on the surface, this question seems pretty straightforward, but it's actually a trap. It's actually a kind of a trick. Not so much because they intend it to be, but just because you don't know who you're dealing with and you don't know what the situation is, it can be a trap. Here's why. Okay, when people are asked this question, what are your strengths? Our tendency is to say things about ourselves that we consider to be good. Okay? Now, we consider these things strengths, so we assume, oh yeah, the person hearing this will consider those things a strength. That can be a very bad assumption. Let me explain. Okay, let's say I was asked this question. Someone says, Bill, what are your strengths? And I say, well, one of my strengths is that I have very good attention to detail. So I tend to give a lot of detail. And I do this because I know how it feels to come back to something, sometimes weeks later, not remembering anything, about it, and you have to read your own notes. And a lot of times our notes, they only serve to jog our memory. So if we remember what went on, our notes, jog our memory and then we remember. But if we can't remember, when we just rely on our notes, it's incomprehensible. We don't know what we were referring to, so we need more detail. So I pay attention to detail, and that's one of my strengths, because I've always got the details to back up any kind of argument or any kind of story. That if someone challenges me on it, I got as much detail as you need. So I consider that my strength. So I say this, right? Now, unbeknownst to me, the recruiter that asked me this question, they're thinking, wow, that's really not a strength. That's the opposite of strength. You see, we're looking for someone who can, I don't know, go and talk to people and build relationships and do sales. And now I'm concerned that you'd be the type of person that would be jotting down all the notes and spending 4 hours on the paperwork, and you wouldn't be out there talking to people, building relationships, selling products. So you don't look like the right candidate for this job. You see? So what I consider to be a strength is not what they consider to be a strength. And that's the problem with this question. We're sort of guessing about what we want, what they want to hear. Okay? That's the problem with the question. So here's how you get around that. Okay? I'm just going to pull up my notes so I know what to say, but I just want to say it in the right order here. Okay. So here's how you answer that question. What do we know about these people and what they would consider strengths? Well, they've told us in the job posting. They've said, we're looking for someone who has this, and this. They've got this education. They've got this experience. They've got these skills, right? They've already told us that. So if they ask you, what are your strengths? And you start answering by saying, well, I have 5 years in this, and I have this education, and I have these skills, and you start mentioning the things that they've said they're interested in and they consider to be good, you're giving them what they want to hear. And their ears are going to perk up and they're going to go, okay, this person seems to get it. They seem to have all the things that we consider to be good, right? So that way, when you talk about your strengths, you're giving them things that they see the value in, not just you, okay? And that way you pass the question, at least the strength part. Now, what happens if you go down the job requirements and it turns out that you don't have a couple of them? Do you not mention them? Here's the deal. If they've said, we're looking for these things, and on your resume, it doesn't say that you have them or you have a couple of them. Maybe you have 7 out of the 10 or something, right? By bringing you into an interview, they're signaling that those 3 that you don't have, those aren't deal breakers, okay? Maybe all they want to know is that those 3 things, they're not going to be issues, right? So they might say, we want 2 years experience in customer service or something. Now, let's say you have no years experience in customer service, right? But you say something to put their mind at ease. You say like, well, when I was working in this job, I occasionally would interact with customers, and it occasionally involved answering their questions and resolving issues for them. So even though I never worked directly in customer service, I have done that activity before, and I was regarded to be pretty good at it. You know, so you say something like that, and they think, okay, customer service is not going to be an issue for this candidate, so I'm not worried about that requirement. Okay, so you might not be able to say you have the requirement technically, but as long as you can put their mind at ease that it's not going to be an issue, you still get a pass. So that's how you answer the strengths component of what are your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, now we got to talk about the other half of this question, the weakness part, because they asked you what are your strengths and weaknesses. You guys like it? Does this look a lot more pristine when I get rid of the stuff off my screen? So the weakness component, it's a different question. They're basically asking you, what are your weaknesses? Or what is your greatest weakness? Or some variant of it, okay? Here's how we answer that part of the question, okay? Now, a recruiter's job, and also hiring managers choose to do this too, they're looking for good things about you, the reasons why they would hire you. They're also looking for risk factors. They're looking for red flags. So if you say anything that might be considered a red flag, like let's say you meet all the job requirements, but you say, oh, I have a terrible temper or something like that. Like, you know, you have the requirements, but that temper thing, that's a red flag. I don't know if I want to hire you if you've got this insanely short fuse or something, you know. and you're 6'5" and 3 feet wide, and you can bench press my car. It might not be a good thing to have you around. So they're also looking for risk factors and red flags. So that's what the weakness question is probing for. Okay. Now, the conventional wisdom is, and this is the answer that I've heard a lot of recruiters give, and I find that it's very dishonest and very self-serving, because in my opinion, they're feeding you misinformation. They say, when asked this question, what are your weaknesses? You should say a legitimate weakness that you feel you have, and then say how you've been working on it and you are working on it so that you can overcome it. And the purpose of that is to show self-awareness and being authentic. And everybody has weaknesses, and you're aware of your own, and you are working on self-improvement. Okay, so that's the conventional answer that a lot of recruiters give when they advise you how to answer this. I disagree. Okay, I've been behind the table as a hiring manager, and many years ago I've been a candidate for many jobs, and I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder from some of the interviews that I went to. I disagree. The weakness question often is used in a very lazy way by interviewers for you to eliminate yourself. So they say, what's your greatest weakness? And you say, I'm a raging alcoholic, but I'm working on it, or, I absolutely hate short people. I can't abide short people. Just the sight of them in the office working with me, makes me see red, right? But apart from that, I've got a PhD, and I'm a perfect fit for the requirements, right? So you say this stuff, and their response is, well, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate your candor. And then they eliminate you, right? So you've just been given enough rope to hang yourself, as it were, right? So the other thing is that the point of view of the recruiter is that they start with a pool of candidates that's very big. They might bring 6 to 8 of those in to do interviews, and then you have, if there's one job at the end, you have to eliminate 5 to 7 of the candidates. Now, a lot of these candidates look pretty good. A lot of times, all of them, would be certainly capable of doing the job. So you've got to find reasons of eliminating them and selecting the one that you're going to go with. So if you have one candidate that says, I hate short people, or something silly like that, well, there's your reason to eliminate that candidate right there, right? So this question is kind of a trap. If you're honest and you say, listen, my legitimate weakness is that, I can't do public speaking. I can't do presentations. I get so nervous, that I'm useless. I can't be given that kind of work because I just can't do it. I'm trying to work on it, but, it's a real challenge for me. So you're honest and you're giving them legitimate stuff here. And your big reward is that they eliminate you and they hire another candidate who, when asked this question, doesn't say anything incriminating, right? That's your big reward for this kind of honesty. So this is the problem. So how can we answer this question but not eliminate ourselves? Because we all have weaknesses. And if that's the only thing you know about a person, it looks pretty bad. You're making a bad first impression by saying this stuff. Okay? So here's the answer. Here's how you do this, okay? You don't give any kind of real weakness that could hurt your chances at getting the job. You don't say anything that could sound bad or give the wrong impression. And here's how you do it. You give a legitimate, understandable side effect of a strength. Okay? So what would be a strength? A strength might be, I'm great at talking to people. I have a lot of charisma. People like me, and I'm really good at building relationships, positive relationships with everybody around me. Okay? So that's a strength. But what would be the side effect of that? Maybe it's that, that takes time. I don't spend as much time, if I'm a knowledge worker, behind my desk doing my work. Instead, I'm out talking to people. I'm out by the water cooler, whatever, right? So that could be a side effect. I mean, you could find several side effects. Maybe some people don't appreciate the fact that I go out of my way to do this. Maybe a lot of introverts kind of are a bit wary of me, or, whatever. You can find a side effect of doing this great thing. So that's what you say as a weakness, because it is. It's not technically a lie, but it's so understandable that they can't eliminate you because of it. Think of like a trade-off. I do high quality work, but it takes a bit of extra time, right? I spend a lot of time on my work, but it's very good quality, right? Or I do a great quantity of work, but sometimes the quality might not be there. Like a lot of things are trade-offs, right? So these are great candidates for things to say, and you can be honest about yourself, right? But that's what you say. Now, a great way to say it, okay, a great way to phrase this kind of answer is to start off by giving a strength. I'm great at talking to people. I build a lot of positive relationships, but that can sometimes mean that I don't spend as much time on my actual work as maybe certain other people. Okay, that's your weakness. And then, rather than leaving them hanging with this and thinking like, oh, okay, so you're the type of person that you don't do a lot of work and that could be an issue. So instead of leaving them with that, you explain how you fix it. So you would end by saying, well, but what I found is that if I take a few minutes at the end of the day to, I don't know, when everybody's getting ready to go home, I stay a few minutes later and I make sure that all my office work is always done, to the boss's satisfaction. It's never a problem, right? So I technically give a weakness. It's not something that, you could eliminate me for, because it's just simply a side effect of doing something amazing. And if you have any concerns, you don't have to worry, because I solve the problem of that weakness by doing this. Right? So that's a great way to phrase something. So if you think about it, you could weave anything like this in this format. In my example a minute ago, I said, I build relationships. That's obviously a strength. I have a lot of charisma. Everybody likes me because I go out of my way to meet them and make them feel good about themselves and blah, blah, blah. That's a strength. The weakness is I don't spend as much time on my work as maybe it would be technically possible to, because I do spend time on cultivating positive relationships with people around me. But I solve the problem by spending some extra time at the end of the day to make sure that all my work is done properly, so that, I'm never actually creating any issue in terms of like not having done my work or anything. It's always done. It's never a problem. Right? Now, you could flip that on its head if you wanted to. You could say the opposite. You could say the opposite of that. Now, I don't know what the opposite would be. It would be, I don't engage in chit chat. I feel that, if I'm on the job, I have to be productive. That's my strength. However, sometimes I could be perceived as being a bit aloof, a bit, detached, because I'm never out socializing with any of my coworkers, right? That's my weakness. But what I do is what I've found is that if I take a few moments at the end of the day, after my work has been completed, to go and socialize with my coworkers, ask them how they're doing, engage in some chit chat and be friendly and warm to everybody, I find that I can cultivate very positive relationships around the office, right? Despite not really doing that in an ad hoc way throughout the day, something like that. You could spin this any which way as long as you use that format. Strength, weakness, strength. Okay? A great thing you do. Here's the negative side effect, but here's how you eliminate the issue of that side effect. Okay, so that's how you answer the weakness component. So if someone asks you, what are your strengths and weaknesses, you would say these two answers back to back. It might take you a little while, but that's how you'd answer them. What really helps is doing your preparation on this stuff first and getting your story straight. And then when they ask you this kind of thing, you have some answers prepared. and you go in there, you just bang them off. You can say them in a very efficient way, and you can easily give your combined answer in under a minute. That's what it's possible to do if you prepare for this. Okay, so that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully that makes sense.